Publitarian and a Republican. Welcome to Publitarian Podcast.
Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, everybody. This is Ronald Johnson, Publitarian, coming at you again with another episode of Publitarian Podcast. And we are up to episode number 96, and I believe I'm going to call this episode The Day Before. And I'm just going to talk about what's going on in the news. We are coming up on the inauguration of Joe Biden, President-elect Joe Biden, as the President of the United States. So I thought I would give my thoughts and feelings on that, but before I do, I want to give a shout-out to all of my new listeners on Gab TV. Shout out to you guys. I actually just put the episode up there just to kind of like show some solidarity for Gab for being like one of the few hosting platforms left for actual free speech and free thought, and then I ended up getting a bunch of downloads off of it. So thank you guys. I appreciate you guys tuning in and listening to this podcast. And then also, shout out to my friends at rumble.com. I started, again, just posting videos just so there's alternate platforms for my podcast to be put upon. So I'm not, a slave to YouTube and all of the other, tech giants, the tech tyrants, I should say. And those episodes have been taken off as well. So shout out to new listeners on rumble.com and shout out to new listeners on Gab TV. If you guys are not familiar with these alternate platforms, I'm a big believer in alternate platforms and decentralizing your media and where you get your content. And I was putting a lot of eggs in the Parler basket, and as anybody who's listening to this podcast already knows what's happened to Parler, they kind of put their eggs in one basket too and had their web hosting through Amazon Web Services and all these other platforms that are unfriendly to them. And I don't know if they just thought that, this wasn't going to happen to them, or I don't know, just a miscalculation or what, but I'm not going to be leaving Parler, of course. I do like that platform, so it will be back, according to the CEO, sometime before the end of the month. And so in the meantime, I guess we'll just wait and see what happens with that. But I'm a big believer, like I said, not putting my eggs in one basket. So I'm trying to put myself out on all of these alternate platforms. I'm also on Minds as well. Minds does not get the traffic that some of these other places do, and it seems that they have kind of gotten away from the the purge, so to speak. Even though I'm getting ready to talk about that, and it seems to be a real thing that's happening and a real thing that's coming. But anyway, shout out to you new guys on Gab and Rumble.com. If you're not familiar with Rumble, also, it's basically a YouTube alternative. You go on and you just watch videos, and it's not necessarily political. That's what I like about the platform. You can watch, puppy videos, cat videos, people playing musical instruments. It's everything's on there on that platform. It's searchable, pretty easy to use, and then you just you can give likes or dislikes, except they call it rumbles, and it's a cool little platform. Anyway, I would recommend giving them a listen and a look as well. Now, anyway, on to the content. I spoke about the purge of conservatives and conservative media from the biosphere, and I thought about it, how some of it is kind of tongue-in-cheek, and then some of it is actually happening. And then, irony of ironies, I go to pull up a video clip of this media montage of journalists celebrating the purge of conservatives and how we're not doing enough, and now they need to, have this social credit score system, and they need to be shunned and ostracized. And I went looking for that video clip because I have heard it on other sources, and I couldn't find it. And then it was I had this realization of, I know why I can't find it, because I'm trying to use a search engine that is unfriendly. And DuckDuckGo used to be a good alternative to Google. And unfortunately, I don't think it's anything nefarious on DuckDuckGo's part. So what happens with these search engines is that companies pay money to have their content put up in front if you do any kind of basic search. So you have to sometimes dig pages and pages in your search results, if you're a conservative, that is, to get to the content that you're looking for. And then part two of that battle we have to fight is the right, just as well as the left, has a lot of clickbaity stuff that they have to navigate. So it's an uphill battle. So funny enough, I could not find the video clip that I was looking for, even though I saw it and heard it. And I'm like, well, this kind of proves my point then about censorship. But anyway, it was Joy Reid and the usual suspects talking about the Baathification of the right. In other words, comparing us to the Ba'ath Party of Saddam Hussein, us being purged from the movement. And very just chilling stuff. It's just a little preview of what's coming our way if we don't turn this ship around. So anyway, the left is not done with that. They are just getting started. But before I get into that, for my new listeners, this is basically what my show is about. Sometimes I do a lot of reactions to news of the day, or I would say news of the week, because this is basically a weekly podcast. I don't have a long attention span, so usually my podcasts are about 20 minutes long. They're not really a huge time commitment, and I'll put them out usually once a week, sometimes less, sometimes more, depending on how the real life situations are going. And like I said, I will just talk about news of the day, and I'll give my perspective on things. I know the internet is not short of perspectives on things, but I think where mine is unique is I wouldn't want to call it a balanced perspective, because I don't really see myself left at all, but I do see myself as someone that has some common sense and can look through the clickbait and the talking points of both sides of the political aisle. And that's the perspective I try to bring. I like my tagline is always stuck between a libertarian and a Republican. If you're a libertarian and you're listening to the show, you're probably not going to be a huge fan of it, because the only part of me that's a libertarian is just the idea of libertarianism, that I can live in this magical world where everybody leaves me alone and everybody can do what they want. It's fantasy land. It's never going to happen, because the human heart is the human heart. Everybody is always eventually going to be in each other's business, and it's just not how the world works. And that's why I know that libertarianism is an ideology and will never really get any political traction other than a few percentage points. Libertarian leaders are okay, but have you ever met actual libertarians that follow these leaders? They're usually just very angry people that have a one world view of things, and you're just never going to win anybody over to your side like that. So that's why I'm stuck between the ideology of that and kind of republicanism. But as far as republicanism goes, it seems like we're in this endless cycle of electing Republicans and just flipping the coin and hoping they do what we elected them to do, whereas Democrats don't have that problem. If they elect a Democrat, they're going to get a Democrat, with the very, very small exception of somebody like a Vernon Jones that switches parties. Case in point, there was a brand new representative just elected that voted for Trump's impeachment. I mean, what do you do with that? You're a Republican. You went against your entire establishment to vote for that. And the guy even said, I can't remember his name now, Mazier or Razier or something like that. And he was like, this is probably going to cost me. Yeah, numbnuts, it probably is. But anyway, yeah, you're voting Republican. You really are just flipping the coin and hoping for the best. And I know with all the events coming up that a lot of people I see in my social media feeds are clamoring now. And I've even said it myself, like on Gab, like, maybe we should start the MAGA party. I've kind of tongue-in-cheek when I said that. I ended up getting a lot of quotes. You don't call them retweets on Gab, but yeah, people were serious about that. Or yeah, we need to start the Patriot Party and stuff like that. Okay, it sounds like a good idea on paper, but I honestly think if we were truly to do that, it would kind of shoot ourselves in the foot. Unfortunately, we have to work with the system that we're in, not with how we hope the system could be. I mean, it's nice to have hope, but as the great Bongino says, hope isn't a strategy. It's one of my favorite lines. It's good to have a strategy. It's good to have a plan. And unfortunately, I don't think breaking off into some kind of third party will do anything, because we're not really a parliamentarian system here. A lot of states are winner take all states, so just whoever gets the most votes wins. And if you start diluting that and splitting that off, the Democrats obviously are already committing voter fraud. I don't think that's a good path moving forward. So probably working within the Republican structure that's there and keep voting out the rhinos will more than likely be the best way to go. There's no easy, good, right, 100% pure, true answer to this. Sometimes it's kind of, well, if you're a Republican, you're kind of used to picking the lesser of the two evils. And unfortunately, I think that's what we're going to be dealing with. Anyway, I didn't mean to go off on that whole tangent. But anyway, so that's what this show is about. I kind of do a perspective between kind of like what a libertarian and a Republican would think. And I just try to do common sense approach. Like if you're like a full-on like flag-waving MAGA guy, this may not be the show for you. Or if you're a full-on, leave me alone, everything is permissible libertarian guy, the show is probably not going to be for you. I really just try to do like what I think is the best solution and the most common sense answer to what's going on in the world. But for any of my MAGA listeners, don't leave me. I am like 100% on the Trump train. I thought I should clarify that. He has done so much with so little help and so little time. He's honestly made it look like the other presidents weren't even trying. So yeah, God bless him, no matter what happens in the future. I mean, damn. Not that I need to sell my show, I guess, to people that are already listening, but one of the advantages of listening to this show is I'm usually a few weeks ahead of the news cycle. Just for example, I gave this prediction that Kamala Harris's name pronunciation was going to be used as a bludgeon against the right, and then I actually ended up having a conversation with a leftist, and sure enough, a few weeks later, they got really angry when I pronounced her name wrong. But yes, the left are the informed ones, and we are just the great unwashed. Funny enough about that, shout out to my boy Anish, an Indian who lives in India, who told me that even Kamala Harris is pronouncing her name wrong, and she's not pronouncing it correctly either. But the left never lets that stop them. They never let the truth get in the way of a good narrative and a good way to bludgeon the right about something. So again, thank you for that, Anish. So I'm usually just a few weeks ahead of what's going on with it. I usually see what's happening, but before it's going to happen, not because I'm any kind of clairvoyant. It's just because the left's playbook doesn't really change, and that's what's frustrating. It's frustrating to me that the right can't catch up. We're always on defense because a lot of people on the right have this moral compass, and to their credit, but also to their detriment, that they won't go on the offensive. So they're always just waiting to react to things that happen to them. Right-wing Republican politicians are masters of this. Matter of fact, I think a lot of them are just comfortable being in that position where they just wait to react to whatever's happening. Can you believe this politician said this? Can you believe this happened? Rather than doing something about it. So it's no big trick. I usually know what's going to happen because the playbook never changes. It's always, basically Saul Alinsky's Rules for Radicals, which was written decades ago, and it's a playbook that they still follow. You amplify the voices of the people that you yourself have disenfranchised by your own government programs, and then you pit them against the people perceived as having wealth, and then the people that have wealth have to feel bad about their wealth or spend so much in woke points to get the attention off of them. And it's all from Saul Alinsky's books, Rules for Radicals. And then if you ever get caught with any kind of wrongdoing, you blame the other side of the aisle, or you blame your opponent for that which you are guilty. It's been happening for decades. So, like I said, not any kind of clairvoyance. It's just the same old playbook. And while I'm thinking about it, I saw this great tweet. Of course, I didn't see it on Twitter because I took my stand, and Publitarian is no longer on Twitter. But I did see this from the official Jordan Rachel. I believe she's a Turning Point USA ambassador. And she said, I'm paraphrasing, but she said something to the point of that both Trump and Biden wanted to put walls around what they want to protect or what they want to value most. Trump put it around America, and Biden put the wall around government. Damn! I thought that was a pretty mic drop worthy tweet. And so true, because what's happening now is basically this inauguration is turning into, looks like a militarized zone. Can you imagine just for 1 second if President Trump had done this and put all these military things in place and barbed wire and walls and everything else? The left's heads would be exploding right now about, that he's another Kim Jong-un and he's a dictator and he's a Nazi. It's kind of funny because he got kicked off of Twitter. Typically, Nazi, fascist, totalitarian dictators don't get kicked off of social media platforms. They usually control the social media platforms. Who does that sound like to you? Anyway, I could spend an entire show, and a lot of podcasters do, pointing out left-wing hypocrisy, but there is no standards or principles on the left. It's all just reactionary, and it's whatever suits me for that moment. That's what my principles will be. But there are no bedrock principles. It'll be a cab 1 minute, and then if a handful of right-wing knuckleheads attack the Capitol, then it'll be back the blue in the next minute, and rah, we need to protect our government buildings, and they're sacred, and yada, yada, yada. So it's just whatever fits their narrative, whatever fits their end goals. Anyway, my take on the inauguration, a lot of this is twofold. And when I say this, I'm talking about all the military presence and all of this stuff. This does two things. It validates in the public's eye, because the media will continue to cover this, that there are crazy right-wing terrorists and there's 80 million of them, and we need to start surveilling them and watching them closely and kicking them off of social media. When in reality, if you strip it all away, both left and right, you had a handful of knuckleheads that broke into the Capitol and literally did nothing. And one lady died, as a matter of fact. That was on, the right side, so to speak. And now, after we've sat and waited for a week, more truth has come out. We see that a BLM agitator and an Antifa supporter, and then also a politician's kid, was involved with this. And a CNN person was also involved in this. And the dummy took video with the girl that he was with in the Capitol building, celebrating and going, "Yay, we did it!" And she's like, "Oh no, are you gonna delete this?" He's like, "Oh yeah, don't worry, I'm gonna delete it." Well, he didn't delete it. It made its way to social media. Any of this stuff you can research, you can find online. So the left agitated this. They helped orchestrate it because, yes, of course, the right was mad. They had an election stolen from them. And the left agitated this and pushed these people into the Capitol, and now all right-wingers are terrorists, magically, because the media controls the narrative. So anyway, back to my point. The inauguration and the optics of this military presence do two things. One, it validates the fears that people on the left may or may not have about agitators and domestic terrorists, quote-unquote, on the right. And then another thing it does, it's for optics. Joe Biden was not going to fill the mall like Trump was or even Obama was. So if you tell a populace that a president got 80 million votes, more so than Messiah Obama in 2008, then there are going to be some optics you have to do. So Biden couldn't even fill a gymnasium, so there was no way he was going to fill the National Mall. So part B of this plan was to just wall everything off, say, oh, well, we're scared about domestic terrorism from the right, and then that way you don't have to have a crowd, and Biden gets to skate again. He gets protected by the media and the fourth branch of government every step of the way. If you're a new listener to the podcast, I talk about the fourth branch of government a lot. I call it the admin, and it is the unelectable, unaccountable bureaucrats that really run the United States government. And Trump did a lot of swamp draining, but obviously he didn't do enough. And it's really easy just to sit in armchair quarterback and go, well, he could have done this better, he could have done that better. Yeah, he's a human being. Everybody could always do something else better. But he made it a point to not personally go after his political enemies. And I think he thought that would, weigh in his credit. But what ended up happening is people in the FBI, people embedded in the CIA, people embedded at the Pentagon, all these, admin levels of government, he would give an order and then they would just slow walk it. And they slow walked it so much that now he's getting ready to leave office and nothing has happened with any of these orders. And nothing is going to happen with any of these orders either. They're all just going to disappear magically into the ether once President-elect Biden becomes President Biden. As hard as that is for me to say. I was holding out hope there would be something happening and that, Trump had some kind of 4D chess plan, yada, yada. And don't worry, I'm not like a QAnon Q-tard for any of my new listeners. I gave up on even a hint of believing that stuff a long time ago. But what surprised me, what was the killing blow for me, was the Supreme Court not taking the case of the election fraud. Once that happened, once the Supreme Court said, no, we're not taking the case, I'm like, okay, well, nothing's going to happen. And so here we are again on the right playing defense. But anyway, like I said, so the military stuff and everybody, scared of the right-wing terrorism, all that stuff, it's just BS, it's just optics. I have secret feelers out there that look at the really crazy right-wing stuff, stuff that I wouldn't even ascribe to. I just want to see what they're thinking. And even the crazy boogaloo boy right-wingers are do not go to Washington DC. We have nothing planned. There are no events planned. Nothing is going on. Do not go here. Basically, Admiral Akbar's "It's a trap" from Star Wars, if you're a nerd like me. So there is no violence planned. There's nothing happening. Believe me, I have checked all my sources. So if there is any kind of agitation, it's going to be more masquerading from the left. So government is emboldened to do more with the quote unquote problem of right-wing domestic terrorism. It's really amazing that Republicans won historically wherever there was an established voting system of checks and balances already in place. But let's not question any of that. Anyway, some more voter fraud was found. If you are a listener to this show, I talk a lot about voter fraud, and with good reason, because not enough was done, and here we are. So anyway, a lady ended up getting prosecuted, and she's going to jail for widespread voter fraud in Texas. And now remember, we've been told there was no widespread voter fraud by the media. And now if any of my friends on the left listening will go, well, Ronald, that was just one case. Let me say it back to you, but the inflection will be different. Yeah, that's just one case. That's just one case. See how it sounds? Some good news in all of this. Twitter and Facebook lost about $51 billion after starting their great purge of Trump and Trump followers. So couldn't happen to a nicer bunch of guys. Before we take a huge victory lap on that, these people, these Silicon Valley people, are ideologues at heart. So even if you hit them in the wallet, they're not going to care. They're going to double and triple down. But their investors are going to care. The people that actually put money into these companies are going to care, because everybody's all SJW and woke until you start hitting them personally in the wallet, and then the stories and tunes change. It's, tale as old as time. Oh, anyway, I meant to give that guy's name, the Antifa supporter, Daniel Allen Baker. Jack Posobiec broke this. He was arrested for plotting an attack on Trump supporters on inauguration day. That's another one that's happened that's in the news. I'm giving you these names because you have to physically go look up these names and look in the search engines, or else mainstream news will bury them. John Sullivan was the other one. He was a BLM guy arrested for inciting at the Capitol. And then there was another son of a politician. He was 34 years old. I can't remember his name. And even though it really takes no effort to point out left-wing hypocrisy, I would just like to point out the fact that we spent most of 2020 with the left literally burning down buildings and cities to the ground, including their precious government buildings that they care so much about, breaching the White House, and now they're so sanctimonious about these buildings and how they need to be protected. Anyway, President Trump had to go down to the bunker with the Secret Service because of this, but all that gets swept under the rug. So don't act like the other side of the aisle is beyond occupying government buildings, because they did. Anyway, I'm repeating myself. I was talking about that on another episode. So I guess we will see what happens with this inauguration tomorrow. I'm not going to be doing a podcast covering it. Obviously, if there's anything breaking or anything going on, I'll cover it the next day. Because another thing I try to do on this podcast is I try to be as factual and truthful as I can, even if it's damaging to what I think my political ideology or feelings are. I want to report the truth here. And I mean, that's what everybody should strive to do, but not many people do. So I may do a reaction podcast after the inauguration, but we'll see as time permits. But anyway, a shout out again. Thank you to all my new listeners that started listening. Be sure to subscribe and tell your friends. And that will do it for me on this edition of Publitarian Podcast. If you want to reach out to me, you can. I'm Publitarian@protonmail.com. That's Publitarian@protonmail.com. Proton Mail is a free mail service, kind of like Gmail, except they're not reading your mail like Google does. I am on all the social medias. I'm on Gab, I'm on Minds, I'm on Parler whenever they resurface. The only mainstream social media that I'm still on is Instagram, and I am Publitarian on all of these. There's also a new app called Liberty Centric that I've been trying out. I'm even on Locals now, locals.com. That was one started by Dave Rubin and Dr. Jordan Peterson, I do believe. I know for sure that Dave Rubin is behind it. I'm not sure about Jordan Peterson. But anyway, I'm on there as well, Publitarian. So anyway, thank you again for listening to this podcast, and I'll see you guys on the next one.
Listening to Publitarian Podcast. Copyright 2021.